What if your energy bill was just 10% of what it is currently? Or better still, what if your energy was free? How about you sell some energy back to the grid, make some money and walk away with some profits instead? All this could be your future, and it could even come true by 2030 if we do things right. No need for any new power plants, which would not be completed by then anyway. The UK alone spends £45 billion every year just on energy imports. Think what we could spend that money on. By ship, by lorry or by pipeline, we also waste a lot of energy just to take it where it is processed. And then we waste a lot more getting it to the point of consumption. What if we produced our own energy much cheaper than we buy from elsewhere? And what if we produced it nearer where we consume it, so we do not waste as much during transmission? I have some amazing facts and figures to share with you if you stick around, and we could craft a better future in just the next decade with a little planning and some forward thinking. Let me show you some data and figures which may come as a shock, because basically solar and wind, even with battery storage included in the price, are already the cheapest form of energy there is. And more than that, the prices that are quoted for the cost of energy from all other legacy generators are incorrect, and by a substantial amount. They are in reality far higher already than we are led to believe, and that is even without pricing in their devastating impacts on the environment. And as I will show, they will only get more expensive with time, whereas new clean technologies such as solar and wind are just getting started, and they will continue to decline in cost by another 80 or 90% by 2030. Consider the solar panels I bought for my house over a decade ago. They cost me about £15,000 back then. You can now get more efficient systems for under £5,000. and with battery storage included. And by 2030, that will be more like £1,000 or £2,000, the cost of a year of energy for the average house. Today, large systems will be even cheaper. I know this sounds almost too good to be true, but we are already on the right path. The only question is how fast we get there. Let's look at the details in this almost too good to be true statement, and we could start by remembering the great banking crash of 2008. The housing bubble was worth about $1.3 trillion. Think what it did. In just the last decade, $2.2 trillion has been invested in legacy energy industries, money they are set to lose because they're not going to compete. Instead of the incorrect calculations that are made every year, we need to calculate the cost on actual market data using realistic projections going forward. Taxpayers and ratepayers should not subsidise, insure or backstop any investments in conventional assets. If it is not good enough for shareholders, then do not offload the future debt onto the public. You see, in just the same way that the world ignored subprime investments and tried to ignore their existence, legacy energy assets are also being ignored, with us, the public, being signed up to pay their bills, even if they become too expensive to run. They will be stranded assets that we are contracted to keep paying for. These multi-billion mega projects will be unable to compete with the new disruptive technologies. They cannot compete on price now. In 10 years they will be so expensive in comparison that they will just be mothballed, because even their running costs, the fuel, the labour, the maintenance, never mind the interest on the loans they took out to pay for the capital development in the first place, will be much greater than the cost of energy produced by solar and wind with batteries, and not just by a little, by an order of magnitude. The International Atomic Agency, or IEA, attempts to estimate supply and demand and to work out the cost of different types of energy so governments and companies can make informed choices going into the future. And they call this the Levelised Cost of Electricity, or LCOE. This attempts to estimate the total costs of a power plant over its entire lifetime and then divides this by the total amount of electricity it believes it will be able to sell over its entire lifetime. This then gives a cost per unit of electricity, usually given in dollars and cents to allow easy comparisons globally, per megawatt or kilowatt hour. Now, this was not a problem in the past. We have had central generation of power since the 19th century, or 1871 to be specific, when the first generator powerful enough for commercial supply was invented. And for over 100 years, they have been able to sell almost everything they can generate. So working out the total energy for a set lifetime was a relatively easy job. But now things have changed. There are ever more new generators coming into the market, with new technologies improving fast, and software is allowing the automated buying and selling of energy in a competitive market, and not by the long-term contracts of old. And this has led to many large power stations, especially the peaker plants, selling less energy than they were expected to. Let's just clarify a few terms quickly. Peaker and base load. Base load is the minimum level of demand on an electrical supply system over 24 hours, and any spikes are taken up by peaker plants that deal with the peaks. The IEA World Energy Outlook underestimates solar and wind growth and their price is dropping, and also underestimates the collapse of coal, oil and gas. It projects linear growth for both when it is in reality an exponential curve. And they make the same mistakes every single year, never learning from previous years. Expensive peaker plants will be driven out by the market quickly, as was seen with the recent Tesla battery in Australia, which has already caused the closing of one coal power plant that was scheduled to keep generating until beyond 2028. And when the life of a plant is cut short, the unit cost of its energy skyrockets because the fixed costs, the building of it in the first place especially, is now split across much fewer years and less units of energy. This is a fundamental error in the cost calculation that is used by energy regulators, investors, utilities and governments alike to manage forecasting the future. Ignoring market data leads to mispricing and overvaluation of legacy assets. We know for a fact that market capitalization of coal has collapsed over 90% in just the last 10 years, disrupted by natural gas. This is what solar, wind and batteries will do to all other energy sources in the 2020s. It is inevitable. For example, based on the conservative projection that capacity for each conventional technology declines to 10% by 2035, and altering nothing but capacity factor in the LCOE calculation, the report finds the following. The coal capacity factor. In the US 2010, it was 79%. By 2020, it was below 40%. The UK 2013, it was 60%. By 2020 it was below 10, but the EIA sets a coal capacity factor of 85% every year through to 2040 and beyond, but their own data shows 85% has never been achieved. By 2030 the corrected LCOE is 65 cents per kilowatt hour, 9 times higher than the EIA's LCOE estimate of 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Natural gas, by 2030, corrected LCOE is 18 cents per kilowatt hour, 4.5 times higher than the EIA's LCOE estimate of 4.1 cents per kilowatt hour. Nuclear. In 2020, the real cost was 175% of the LCOE figure. By 2030, it could be more than 13.5 times the cost, with a rate of 105 cents per kilowatt hour compared to the estimate of just 7.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Hydro, 2020 it was about 3 times as expensive at LCOE already. By 2030 it will be up to 9 times the predicted cost, with the corrected LCOE of 49 cents per kilowatt hour, 9 times higher than the EIA's LCOE of 5.3 cents per kilowatt hour. And the gap widens further and further into the future. Past 2030, less demand, less revenue, higher prices. To make the point, basically investment in wells, mines, pipelines and refineries are all being incorrectly costed, even on today's data. The future will not see an improvement. They are yesterday, not tomorrow. They are the old dirty way we used to do things. Our future can be cleaner to benefit us all. Now, understanding that they are already being outcompeted in the free market, even though they are being misrepresented in competitiveness, we can look forward to what 2030 might hold. So we now know unequivocally that solar and wind are the cheapest already today, even cheaper than just the operating costs of legacy fuels like coal. Never mind the cost of building them in the first place. We also know that they are just getting going, and they will get better and cheaper for at least another decade or two. Indeed, solar has dropped in cost by over 80% in the 2010s, and it is predicted to drop another 70% in the 20s. Wind has dropped 46% and will likely drop another 43%. And batteries have dropped an amazing 87% and will drop by another 80% at least. So if cost is just the issue, there is no contest. So what other arguments are there? The opponents say, well, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind does not always blow. Well, that's a great point, thank you. So we need to generate enough and store enough to cover these eventualities. And we have years and years of data to look at to get an idea of the probabilities involved. Indeed, the more generation you include, the less storage you need. And the relationship is a U-curve on a graph, with a sweet spot at the best balance for the best price. And it varies from region to region, but it works out you need 2 to 4 times the capacity along with storage. But you see, the cost per unit is so cheap that this still works out cheaper than using legacy generation. But that is not all, because this has a massive upside. We will be generating vastly more energy than we need on most days of the year. This will lead to an era being termed superpower. Once the solar panel is in and the wind turbine is installed, the energy it generates has an almost zero marginal unit cost. This will drive down prices for the consumer and allow leftover energy to be used for whatever we desire. From desalination to carbon dioxide removal, abundant energy will allow services and innovation to flourish. For example, in a sunny location such as Texas, which was modelled, a 10% incremental investment could cost about $210 billion, and that would produce about 310 terawatt hours of superpower. All clean, no emissions. That is enough energy for all the world's data centres, which use about 200 terawatts. All of the current Bitcoin mining, which uses about 69 terawatts, and would still leave 41 terawatts spare to do with whatever you will. And this is all without impacting the original consumers one bit. This is just the extra power going spare. The return on investment is so great that the move to clean power will be a no-brainer for anyone. Additionally, we should remember that up to 15% of energy produced is lost during the transformation and distribution from generator to consumer. The losses would be greatly reduced. And we should not forget that the average power plant is only 35% efficient on average anyway. About the same as solar panels are right now, but solar is improving fast. And wind turbines are already over 50% efficient, with a theoretical figure of 59% achievable. Now for the mind-blowing facts. We could do this for as little as 1 or 2% of GDP and by 2030. This would have so many knock-on benefits from fostering innovation and growth, all whilst allowing us to bring climate change back under control and help us start breathing clean air once again. So what do you think of a future of cheap, abundant energy? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for dropping by.